So I'm going to be talking about energy, climate change, and transition to a sustainable world. And it's going to have three parts. First, I'm going to talk about the risks of climate change, but really to talk about new data. I'm going to talk about, very briefly, what's happening with oil and natural gas. And then finally, how science and technology are making this the low-cost option. And I'll even put my thing over there. Okay, so let's talk about climate change. So this is data most of you have probably seen. It's the average land and ocean temperature, 1850 to 2014. And it turns out that 2014 was barely, but the hottest year on record. And in fact, 14 of the 15th warmest years around the globe have occurred in the 21st century, in the recent last couple of million years. But there have only been 14 years in the 21st century. Now, if you stare at that graph and you look at it, you notice around 2000, 1997, 8, 2000, there's a temperature plateau. So in Washington, D.C., a lot has been made about this. And they said, look, the climate's not changing. It's not getting warmer. Now, let me also point out there was also a long plateau that was never discussed in D.C. Because if you acknowledge that plateau, you would have to acknowledge what happened in between. So you just focus on the last 15 years and say, well, this was not predicted by the climate models. And so how are you sure the climate's changing? And so what is going on here? The energy coming onto the Earth, as measured by satellites, has been the same. There's been 11-year solar cycles, but the baseline over the last 35 years has been the same. And the energy leaking out has been less. The greenhouse gas effect is real. It's not under dispute. So what's going on? And so let me tell you about what's going on. This is a picture. I spent a summer in 2010, a lot of time in Houston. There was a massive oil leak by BP, and if you go 1 mile deep, this is what you see. You see oil and gas coming out of the damaged blow-up prevention platform. During that summer, the surface of the Gulf of Mexico, excuse me, it's in Fahrenheit, it's 86 degrees Fahrenheit. There, 1 mile deep, it was 2 degrees above freezing all year round. Doesn't change. What's the deal? The deal is the bottom of the ocean. This isn't the bottom. This is 1 mile deep. It's cold. And it takes a long time for the ocean mixing to transfer the energy from the top to the bottom. So what happened recently is we started over the last decade dropping these instruments, that yellow thing, not the person, in airplanes, and they would bobble around in the ocean, and they would take the temperature of the surface. They would go down. They would take the temperature going down, 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 down to 2 kilometers, and they would pop back up, and they would radio the temperature and the salinity of where they were and the position. All right? So we started dropping a lot of these. We, around the world, this is how many we dropped. And so you get reasonable coverage of the ocean. And to make a long story short, this is what came out in 2015, is if you average the energy of the oceans going, including down to 2 kilometers, the oceans were warming up. And it accounted for the heat within about 10 or 15%. Okay. So now, did we predict it? It's a very subtle change in the ocean currents, the mixing of that means that the rate of ocean warming up has gotten a little bit faster. So at least we know, physics works. Energy in the same, energy out less. Where's the energy going? It's going into the ocean. All right? Another physics experiment or measurement. There are 2 satellites that go around the globe. The U.S. has 2 pairs and a pair, and Europe. So this is called Gravity, Recovery, and Climate Experiment. And these two satellites go around a polar orbit. So as the Earth rotates on Earth, these two satellites just go around. And because of that, they can sample everywhere on Earth. Now, what are they sampling? They're sampling little perturbations in gravity that change their orbit. And they measure their orbit both with GPS, but especially by measuring the distance between the two satellites to great precision, less than the width of a human hair, is the precision they measure the perturbations in their satellite orbits. And from that, if the local gravity changes, it bobbles their orbit a little bit. And they go around again and again and again, and this is what they measure. This is Greenland over here. And where you see purple and blue, you see a mass loss. Where you see red and yellow, you see a mass gain. So there's a loss in the acceleration due to gravity around here, and there's a gain, well, nowhere. So the ice mass in Greenland is decaying. It's pretty sensitive. This is the thickness change over this period, 2002 to 2012. This is 20 centimeters, and the average glacier thickness is 2 kilometers. This happens to be in the region of Jakobshavn Glacier, and I've actually been there, believe it or not, for a nanotechnology conference half a dozen years ago. And it's good enough to see summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter. And you see that you're losing mass, but it's accelerating. So it's no longer a matter of taking pictures and thinking maybe your glaciers are shrinking, maybe not. Same measurements in Antarctica. Eastern part of Antarctica was gaining mass for a while. Western part losing mass, but in the last 5 years, much bigger losses. Net, Antarctica is losing ice, and now even the eastern part is no longer gaining that much. It also shows other things that change the acceleration due to gravity, like the loss of water aquifers. The last 4 years, California has been losing about 15 cubic kilometers of underground water per year. And it shows up glowing red. Now, you don't need a satellite to measure the shrinking water tables. You know that your wells are running dry. But in other places around the world, you can just map it all out. And so, now, let me switch gears only very quickly and talk about tobacco use in the United States. 1900 to 2005, this is the average consumption of cigarettes for males, adult males. And in 1900, hardly anyone smoked. By the mid-1960s, if you look at the average consumption, it turns out to be 220 packs a year, including the non-smokers. Okay? Now, what happened? In 1940s and 50s, oops, what is this? These are males dying of lung cancer. And lung cancer used to be a very rare cancer. Then it started to become a very common cancer. What the heck is going on? So then we go into epidemiology. Is there a correlation between cigarette smoking and lung cancer? Now, correlation does not mean causation, as the tobacco companies remind us of. And but by 1960s, the scientific community is saying, this is 1960. Oops, this is more than just a mere coincidence. It got to be so overwhelmingly circumstantial evidence that the Surgeon General of the United States was able to put on the package of cigarettes sold in the United States, caution, cigarette smoking may be dangerous to your health. Maybe. Next Surgeon General wanted to be, is dangerous to your health. He was fired. And so what happened, though, in the 60s and 70s is the United States scientific community got so alarmed, they say, we've got to stop grade school kids, high school kids from starting smoking because tobacco is very, very addictive, and if you can stop them from smoking, that's the best service you can do. So that's what happened. 25-year delay, statistically, from the time you start smoking to the time you die of lung cancer. Lung cancer is still a fatal disease if not caught in time, but this is what we know today. We also know that if you smoke a pack a day of cigarettes, you have a 25 times higher chance of getting lung cancer. You have a 2 or 4 times higher chance of getting coronary heart disease, stroke, congestive lung failure, congestive heart failure, all these things. It is the single biggest threat to human health that's preventable that we know of today. Women start dying later because they started smoking later. All right? Now, this is, in China, you see increasingly scenes like this in Shanghai, Beijing, Harbin, other places. And there's a particular matter, PM 2.5. It means particles smaller than 2.5 microns are particularly deadly, and PM 2.5 next. So in Lancet Oncology 2014, there was an article published. It was a 12 million year person study, the largest epidemiological study. By the way, Epidemiology, the cigarette tobacco companies for 30 years said, you guys can't predict who's going to get lung cancer, who's not. Therefore, you don't understand it. And look at my grandmother. She's alive and healthy. She's wrinkly, but she's alive and healthy. So since science can't predict who's going to get and who's not, it's just a correlation, not causation. Okay? So for 3 decades, they were able to muddy the waters. All right, so something else is appearing. And in this very large study, they tried to disaggregate smoking, other things, from particulate matter. And what did they find? They said for every 10 micrograms per cubic meter of particles less than 2.5, there's a 36% higher chance of getting lung cancer over a decade study. All right, remember the number 10. What's the average Beijing air quality in all of 2013? The whole year, average 2013, was 194. So let me tell you how you extrapolate 36%. You multiply 1.36 19 times, and you get 29. It's as bad as smoking a pack a day since day 0. We don't know if this is true. It will take another 10 years to figure out how deadly this really is. But the early returns are saying it's as bad as cigarette smoking a pack a day. All right? That's bad news. Very bad news. What's the analogy? What does this have to do with climate change? Well, there's not a 25-year delay. We don't know what the delay is. Why is there a delay? Well, I actually told you. The bottoms of the oceans are cold. It's going to take anywhere from 50 to 150 years to come to equilibrium to just warm up the ocean. All right? That's point 1. Point 2 is, once the carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, how long does it take for the Earth to grab it back? Well, we don't know, for 2 reasons. If you assume that it's going to glide back to its natural thing, that's like if you stop polluting a river or a lake, it takes 5 years, 2 years, it depends on what you put in it, for it to clean itself out. We don't know how long it would take to get, with increased temperature, increased vegetation, it will grab more CO2 and you'll fix more carbon dioxide, eventually mineralized. We know the ocean absorbs a lot of the carbon dioxide. More than half of the emitted carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean. The pH of the ocean, that's how much carbon dioxide, fizzy water is slightly acidic, soda water. The acidity of the ocean since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution has increased 30%. It's not a small effect. Okay? So the new equilibrium, we don't know, but it's anywhere from 300 to 3,000 years to return back to the old state with increased vegetation, but there's something else we are worried about. Because in the paleontological record, there's no exquisite thermostat that tells us, oh, the temperature of the Earth is going to be what it is today. In fact, we're in a cold period. We've been going through a succession of ice ages. But we know, looking back tens of millions of years, the Earth was 6-8 degrees warmer. Antarctica was still where it was, but it had no ice. Okay? So there's no exquisite thermostat. So if you tip to a warmer period, it may stay warmer. We don't know. So I'll be honest, you can't predict this. We don't know. We don't understand enough, but there is a risk here. All right. So what else? I talked about how long the CO2 will remain in the atmosphere, big question mark. But it's kind of like secondary smoke. So it looks like maybe for a millennia. So it goes well beyond 2100. Okay, we're going to 3100. All right, energy trends in oil and natural gas. Tell them buy low, sell high. Energy trends in oil and natural gas. So will we run out of oil and natural gas? So I'm going to quote two people I deeply respect. And these people said, our ability to find and extract fossil fuels continues to improve, and economically recoverable reservoirs around the world are likely to keep pace with the rising demands for decades. Well, I said that. Now, why did I and Arun Majumdar, who is director of RPE, why did we write this? Well, in part, we wrote it because of the following. It's driven by data. It's something not usually discussed in D.C., but 1945 to 2012, but peak of oil production roughly 1970. This is the great Alaskan oil find. Even that didn't decline, stop the decline in U.S. oil production. But this little squiggly thing here says tight. That's due to horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. So it was able to release oil and natural gas, and this is oil. And so it was starting to climb. And by 2013, we're up to 7.5 million barrels a day. And by 2014, we're at 8.5 million barrels a day. That's a big increase. So during this period of time, from here to here, it's about a 4.5 million barrel a day increase. You can also notice that the U.S. oil production went flat. It stopped declining. It's because of enhanced oil recovery. So the technology for squeezing more oil out of the rock was getting better and better. The technology for finding new oil was getting better and better. And that number, let's see if I have it here. Yes. 4.5 million barrels a day is more oil that's produced in any other country around the world except Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the United States. More in Iraq, it's more in Iran, it's more in Venezuela, it's more in any other country. Just the increase. So, in addition to that, there's untapped tight oil, heavy oil, very tarry oil. There's offshore oil. There's Arctic oil. There's oil sands in Canada. If you look at the oil reserves around the world, you can say we're not going to run out of oil. Even with rising demand, we're not going to run out of oil for at least a half a century, probably a century. Okay. We're going to get better and better at finding oil, and are, and have been. Another quote, the Stone Age came to an end, not for lack of stones, and the oil age will end, but not for lack of oil. It's actually said by a former Saudi oil minister, Sheikh Yamani. That's not why he's the former Saudi oil minister. He was making a point, several points, but what you really ultimately do when you transition from one technology or one source to another is you transition to a better solution. You don't look around. I don't think you look around and look a bunch of stones in the ground and said, stranded assets. You don't think of every stone having to be an axe or an arrowhead. It just isn't done because we went to a metal age. All right, but there's another side of this that I want to emphasize. If we don't find better technical solutions, the oil and natural gas will come out of the ground. It is just too tempting if you're a country, whether you're a rich country like the United States or a poor country like Venezuela or the Middle East or Russia or you name it to use the oil and natural gas. Coal is a different story because coal is yucky in many respects. That's a technical physics term. But oil and natural gas, it's just too much money in it. All right, so let me talk about science and technology. The very first thing is energy efficiency is saving lots of money as well as decreasing carbon outputs. There's a paper that my colleagues and I published. We actually did the work while I was Secretary of Energy, but it was delayed in publication. This is what are called learning curves. On a logarithmic curve over here, this is the cost of owning and operating a refrigerator, a room air conditioner, clothes washer, or central air conditioner. These little arrows are standards starting in California. The dashed ones start in California, finally going to federal standards that said you cannot sell a refrigerator unless it's above a certain efficiency. And since technology gets better and better, that's what happens is that you have to up the standards. This is the purchase price plus the cost of energy, and this is the purchase price. Now, you can extrapolate where you would be in costs over here, and look what happened. You expected standards to actually decrease the cost of ownership, but you also expected standards to increase the purchase price. And what happened was it didn't really, and in fact, if you just do a 1 or 2 parameter fit and ask the computer on the purchase price, inflation adjusted, of these appliances, where was the inflection point? It seemed to be highly correlated. Refrigerators came a little later with standards. How can standards drive the purchase price down? This is what economists might call a market failure, because if you're a manufacturer, of course you want to make a cheaper appliance. All right? And so we were all excited about this. We submitted the paper to Science magazine. It went out for review. One economist said, this is unbelievable. The supplementary material had reams of other data of Europe, places like that. The other 2 reviewers said, it doesn't care what these authors say, the economists are not going to believe it. Okay, so economists are not physicists. So, let's talk about data. The refrigerator costs have declined 28% for each doubling of production. It's a learning curve. You double production, it goes down by a certain fraction. Double again, it goes down. And if you just looked at the energy of commercial and residential refrigerators since the mid-1970s, it's as if you didn't have to build 30 nuclear power plants. Or, alternatively, all the coal plants in Ohio. Right? Just energy savings on refrigerators. And it saves lots of money. All right. So let me go to clean energy sources. This is a good news story. Wind, 1980 to 2012. This is the sense of the cost of wind in the United States. There was a little supply bulge here. It's worked its way down. It's continuing to go down. This is the production of wind. In the Midwest, wind long-term contracts are being sold at roughly 2.5 cents now per kilowatt hour. That's very inexpensive new energy. If you build a new natural gas power plant and amortize the cost, and the cost, you have to make a guess as to what the cost of natural gas is, but let's say it's 1/4 of what you guys are paying. It's $4. If you guess $4 a million BTU, wind undercuts it. It's cheaper. All right? Wind is tremendous from Canada to the United States. If we get offshore wind is more expensive, but offshore wind is very much steadier and it's really cheaper. So the wind in these plain states up here is going for really inexpensive prices. Right? It is becoming the low-cost option. All right? So very, very good wind. The resolution of this picture is not good enough to see Washington, D.C., where the wind blows outward from all directions. Sorry. I get to make jokes like this now that I'm no longer Secretary of Energy. The wind turbines, especially offshore, are getting bigger and bigger. This one happens to be 6 megawatts, 154-meter diameter rotor. That's pretty big. Let me put this in perspective. The Wright brothers' first flight was 36 meters. Think 1.5 soccer fields or a bunch of Wright brothers hopscotching across to get across here. Offshore wind is currently 2.5 times more expensive, but if you can get offshore wind to work, then many, many places can have very inexpensive renewable power. Let me go to solar. This was a projection made by a solar company we helped, 1366. They started the clock in around 1978. Again, it's a learning curve. Every time you increase production tenfold, the price goes down by a certain fraction. You increase another tenfold, it goes down by a certain fraction. Learning curves are all over the place. Most technologies, including agriculture, follow learning curves. They made this graph in 2008. They said, today, here's where we are by 2015. We're somewhere between retail, natural gas, electricity, and wholesale. So what has happened since then is retail natural gas has plunged because of the low cost of natural gas, but we're here in solar. All right, so very, very inexpensive, ahead of schedule. The installation in the United States was virtually nothing until the late 80s. It puttered around, and then something happened. What happened? Well, I became Secretary of Energy. Now, you may say, correlation does not mean causation. But you would be wrong, because I had to administer a loan program, and the bulk of our loans went to installing large wind and solar farms, although most of the fuss was over the bankruptcy of Solyndra. If you consider all the loans we made, net, we will make the federal government $5 billion. Because all those wind contracts and solar contracts, before you build a project, you had to have an off-take agreement, a power purchase agreement from a utility company. As long as you can build a thing on time, on budget, it was a moneymaker. And they've all turned to moneymakers. The largest loan we made was to Ford Motor Company. In order to make that, it's $6 billion. In order to make that loan, the U.S. Treasury had to set aside $3 billion as insurance. That means we could not spend that money on anything else, whether it's education or health or bridge repair. It's spent. So we set aside $10 billion. We will, on balance, lose $1 billion, but net will make $5 billion. Now, let me tell you, it's not easy to make $5 billion making loans in 2009 to 2013. It was 4.3 years and 2 days, but who's counting? Charging 1.5% interest a year. We didn't do better than VCs. We did better than Wall Street. Okay? So it was, anyway. And because of that loan program, the wind and solar farms now can get Wall Street financing. Wall Street would not touch it in 2009, 2010. Too risky. So at least this one worked. We have great solar resources. There's the United States. All the wonderful, wonderful solar. The solar contracts down here are going for less than 5 cents a kilowatt hour now. You can put a solar on your rooftop where you don't put up any front cash. The company goes in and says, we'll own it, we'll install it, we'll maintain it. If it breaks, we'll fix it. Sign a 20-year purchase agreement with us. We'll sell you electricity 9 cents a kilowatt hour. Retail is about 18 cents in LA. Okay? Half the cost. But you have to be willing to have solar in your roof. All right, there's Germany. There's Alaska. We have much better solar. If you use the same color map, you see that there's tremendous amount of solar all around here. Not so great in Russia, Canada, Northern Europe. but it's really fantastic. Now, if you said, let's take the average of this amount of solar year-round, this is an average of what hits the Earth year-round, and say, if you had 50% conversion efficiency, and we're going to be going to 20%, we're about 17% now, how much land do you need? Well, you need a lot of land. You can't do solar in Hong Kong, but this is how much land you need. Oh, you didn't see those little white specks, so let me put it, that's 10 times the amount of land you need to supply all the world's electricity needs. So it's manageable if you are willing to transmit solar energy over reasonable distances, like continental distances. Okay. So let me also say that as you go from 10 and 20%, Spain and Portugal are 25% wind and solar. Ireland's about 20%. Denmark's higher, but they're tied to the grid, whereas these other places are more isolated. It's okay, but when you go to 50% renewable, you need a very flexible transmission and distribution system. And the cost of the two-way flows, the cost of maintaining stability on the grid, the cost of the upgraded transmission and distribution system, and energy storage are all part of the cost of renewable energy. That's just a reality. At 30%, at 50%, it gets harder and harder. It costs more and more. But by the time you're at 30%, 50% worldwide, it's going to get much cheaper. So that's what I think will happen. What about local generation storage versus long-distance generation storage? Well, again, Hong Kong's a good example. You don't have enough land to put up lots of solar, and you're not going to put up lots of wind, but you have nearby China that's got a lot of renewables. So you need, again, transmission distribution and a way of guaranteeing energy security. So China has installed a 800 kilovolt DC line. It goes 2,000 kilometers from a hydro plant to the eastern part of the United States. You're only losing 7% of the energy. They're going to go, I think, to 1 and then 1.2 megavolts. For those of you in the audience who are not physicists and engineers, the power loss is proportional to V squared over R. And so this is a couple gigawatt line. And so I think in the very near-term future, within the next decade, we'll be transmitting maybe 4,000 kilometers with about 5% loss. Okay? And it's cheaper to go DC once you're about over 600 kilometers. There's a need for high voltage, better transistors, higher power, higher voltage. One of the beautiful things with secondary energy is you can say, we need better materials in gallium phosphide and silicon carbide. What we really want is a diamond transistor. Because a wider band gap means you can make these things even cheaper and cheaper. And so you get to fund that. It's away from the headlines. It's away from anybody except the engineers and scientists you want to fund. So you get to actually look long-term at, oops, I did this before. And so now I have to come back on. There we go. Okay. All right. So let's talk about energy storage. Well, when you normally talk about energy storage, you think of this? No. This is energy storage. When the wind blows, you use the energy to pump water. When you pump water from underground well to a cistern, that's energy storage that we used 150 years ago. We forgot. Time to relearn. Okay? So there's many types of energy storage. You get to use it when it occurs. You desalinate when the wind is blowing, when the sun is shining, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about batteries. In 2008, the cost of automobile batteries, the battery package, was pretty expensive. It cost about $1,000 a kilowatt hour for an automobile battery of the likes of a Nissan Leaf, a Chevy Volt, and a Tesla. And in 2011, we in the Department of Energy got together and said, what could the roadmap really be for batteries? We did the same for solar. In solar, we said, we can get to $1 a watt. $1 a watt means a certain illumination, the cost of everything. The insulation, the solar module, the electronics, you bet it costs $1 a watt to generate. And we thought by 2020 that would occur. We're getting there today. So we lowballed it, but when we came out, the solar community said, "What are you guys smoking? You're not going to. We think $2 a watt by 2020." And so we said, "No, we'll sit down." And at a solar conference 2 years later, a founder of solar SunPower said, these guys may go back and look at our roadmap, and they were right. We can get there. Now, the same thing happened with batteries, but by 2012, it was $500 a kilowatt hour. But we said maybe by 2022, automobile battery pack could be $150 manufacturing cost per kilowatt hour, and utility scale storage at the hundreds of kilowatts to tens or hundreds of megawatts could be maybe $100 a kilowatt hour. $100 a kilowatt hour is equal to pumped storage, putting water from one hydroelectric dam to another, or so on. So where is progress? Well, this is Bloomberg New Energy Finance projection of what the cost of batteries would be from 2010 to 2030. And this is the actual prices, manufacturing costs. And so we're marching down this ahead of schedule. Tesla wants to build a so-called gigafactory, and they were projecting a certain cost. And so what I did is I slid over by I added 2 years and increased costs by 30%. It's the Elon Musk factor. But even if you take more conservative projections, you find that we were making projections by 2022 that they would be here by 2018. Or, their presumably first stage should be over by 2016. So they're ahead of schedule also. However, there's cost and there's performance. Now, the performance of a cell phone battery has dramatically increased. You may not notice it. It still runs out 2 hours before you... Okay, but the energy per unit volume, which is the figure of merit of a cell phone, has increased fourfold since the time Sony introduced the first lithium-ion battery around 1991 or 2. Okay, energy per unit volume has gotten a lot better. The energy loads have increased, partially compensated by software, but those displays really suck a lot of power. And things like that. But energy per unit weight has not increased that much, only 30%. So where are we on that? The Tesla battery, the long-range Tesla, 885 kilowatt hours. This is my best guess for what the Tesla manufacturing costs are today. They won't tell me, even though I loaned them $460 million. They paid the loan back in full 7 years early. Okay, that's part of our net. We could have actually made more from them, but they slipped on a milestone. So I got on the phone and said, Elon, just pay back the loan. Get us out of your hair. We had some effectively what are called stock options. They're not called stock options, but so we let them out. We could cash them in $85 a share. And it was about $270 a share. We had 300,000. But we were out to make money. But in any case, so Yishui, who is a professor of material science at Stanford, has been in the battery business for a while. When I came back, I started collaborating with him. And we have 2 patents that Stanford's applying for, and we're on to other things. The current carbon battery anode has about that much energy density. These are the, quote, so-called theoretical maxima. For silicon, it's around here, but people don't have a commercial silicon anode. because the volume changes are very big, but there are several battery companies chasing after this one because of that gain in energy. Yi and I are working on lithium sulfur, as are other people, because with lithium sulfur, you have a huge energy density gain, 4 or 5-fold. And we're trying to figure out how to make them charge 10 times faster. The goal is very simple. We want the car battery to last longer than the human bladder. Let me translate that into non-physics terms. That means it's rare that you drive more than 200 miles without a rest stop. And in that time you're having your rest stop, you'd like to fill her up. Okay? 5 minutes is okay. Okay? And then after that, it doesn't matter anymore. If you can go 400 miles, 300 miles, it doesn't matter. You can fill her up 200 miles in 5 minutes, it doesn't matter anymore. And so that is the goal. And if you get that, it's a no-brainer. You buy an electric vehicle because you can take out your smartphone and you can say, I want to drive, could you cool my car down or warm it up? And it calls you back. It's a one app, and it calls you back 2 minutes later. We're ready. We're waiting. In a gentle way, not I'm in the car waiting. But so you can't do that with an internal combustion engine car with carbon dioxide and other things. So there are many advantages to electric vehicles. All right. I hope I painted for you a world 20, 30, certainly 40, 50 years from today where renewable energy in many parts of the world become the low-cost option. But you have to prepare for it. And so right now, nighttime electricity in the United States goes for less than 2 cents a kilowatt hour, but you can see this for the full levelized cost of new energy. You saw the solar maps. I can show you wind maps around the world. It looks pretty good. And so what are you wanting to do with this energy? Well, if you really have cheap energy, can you take captured CO2 and turn it to CO? Can you take water? Can you split it to oxygen and hydrogen? And can you make these other molecules like octane, decane? These are the molecules, linear hydrocarbons used in diesel and gasoline fuel. And so this is recycling now of carbon. The full recycling of carbon is you've got to capture it from the air and use really cheap energy to capture it and then cycle it back. And so at this point, you're not sequestering carbon. You're just going in a sustainable closed loop. We don't know how far away we are from that, but this is the 21st century thing. If you can get this, you've got it made. Why? Because we have long-distance transmission. It's called an oil tanker. And you have energy security. You know, most of the OECD countries have 6 months supply of transportation fuel in their own borders. And so now, once you go 4,000 kilometers, you can actually hopscotch across the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic with transmission as well. So there's a whole bunch of things you will need, but this is something we really need to go 100% renewable. I don't see us going 80% renewable until we get something like this. All right. So I want to spend a little time on my time at Department of Energy. It had a budget of $26 billion a year. We had an additional $34 billion of one-time only money, discretionary money. I was never so handsome, witty, or popular in my life because of that. As noted, a few new programs were started. Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy. It's short-term, high-risk, high-reward. We didn't want to fund incremental research. We're willing to say that 90% of it would go south, but we wanted home runs. We didn't want singles. Energy innovation hubs. This is very daring, but longer term with a 10-year horizon, and a Sunshot, a re-energized solar program. So we did a lot of things like that. To the students, what did some of the lessons I learned while I was Secretary of Energy? You make decisions based on expert knowledge, and you know what questions to ask. You don't have to be an expert in anything. And mostly you make decisions based on a set of core values. If you make decisions based on polls, political expediency, or tactical stuff, you can wrap yourselves in knots. And it's just stupid. Lesson 2. Great people try to hire people better than they are, and they want to people hire who are protégés, not the people who will work for them and take their orders. So the shorthand is A's hire A's and B's hire C's. If you ever want to know how to spot a mediocre bureaucrat, they don't want people below them talking to people above them. They want to control the information. Okay? If you have good people below you that are protégés and stars, you want them to talk to as many people as you can. Okay? Lesson 3, in order to attract and retain the best people, you've got to inspire them, and you've got to remind them. And so when I was the first scientist cabinet member, I called people and said, look, you give up a lot. I gave up a lot. Huge cut in salary, had to sell a house, had to give up tenure position, had to give up all these things. But hey, it's worth it. And he said, what? And said, yeah, just help join me. 2 years, 4 years, I don't care, because we're saving the world. It worked half the time. That's okay. Lesson 4, your protégés spread their wings. So what does that mean? It means when I hired really good people, then you have to bring them in and back them up and not let the bureaucracy drag them down. Because the bureaucrats will try to drag them down. And so what do? You block and tackle for them. You give them the football, go. Head of RPE, all the program managers, RPE, go. Some new crew in Sunshine, go. I would sit down with them for many, many hours, but as a colleague, not as their boss. But their decisions on what to fund and what programs to start is ultimately their decision. They wanted my feedback, but as a colleague scientist. All right. So, I love quotes. And so here's another one. The greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. That was said by Michelangelo. This is what I tell my students and postdocs. This is what I tell my people at Department of Energy. This is what we want to shoot for. We don't want incremental, safe stuff. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about this because it's very personal to me. It has to do with my advisor, Eugene Cummins, and this is, the date's wrong, it was 2001. Professor Cummins was retiring, and his students decided to have what is common in academia. You have a little festschrift. And there was a book published called Art and Symmetry in Experimental Physics, and I'll read this to you. I'm talking about, at the very beginning, I was saying what Professor Cummins taught me was sometimes it's okay to abandon an experiment that isn't going well, and sometimes important to doggedly stick with other experiments. And Gene also expressed the importance of writing clearly. When I presented him with the first draft of my thesis, he showed me a rare moment of irritation. And I quote, "Be more precise. Let the reader know exactly what the ideas are and what was being done." So he just gave it back to me. It was a 2-week job of writing my thesis because I wanted to get on with the follow-up experiment. I was transitioning from being his graduate student to his postdoc, which was tactically the wrong thing to do. No one will ever advise you of doing that. So I began to appreciate that clear writing was synonymous with clear thinking. And I tried to instill the same appreciation of good writing in my own students. Now, my career was truly a random walk. He wanted to work on very, very fundamental experiments, parity non-conservation due to the unification of weak electromagnetic, which was my thesis and postdoctoral topics. And he couldn't understand why I would want to often do things like trying to cool atoms with laser light. That's applied. What good will that lead to? So in the end, I said, in my random walk into areas I knew nothing about, I was armed with the self-confidence that I would not have had I were not Gene's student. I always felt that Gene treated me as special. Gradually, I realized that he treated all his students this way. He believed in us, and as a consequence, we began to believe in ourselves and develop the self-confidence needed to sustain us through the failures we would encounter in our future research. So I'm not sure how things would have turned out for me had I worked for another advisor. What I'm certain about is that I would have achieved far less in my own career, and I owe a great deal to Gene for believing in me, for shaping me, and for remaining my model of what a scientist and mentor should be. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to have to recover a little because he's dying. What I hated most about DC is dealing with the press. Scurrilous things. They would throw a fake quote in front of you, and you said that. What do you think about it? And it was just made up fake. They would twist things around 100% to make a story to try to play gotcha. Finally, February 1, 2013, the administration, the president allowed me to say I was stepping down. That was actually in the works since November. And then The Onion ran this story 6 days later. Hungover Energy Secretary wakes up next to solar panel. Washington. Sources have reported that following a long night of carousing in a series of DC watering holes, Energy Secretary Stephen Chu awoke Thursday morning to find himself sleeping next to a giant solar panel he had met the previous evening, alleging I didn't even remember the manufacturer's name. According to sources, Chu's encounter with the crystalline solar receptor was his most regrettable dalliance since 2009, when an extended fling with a 90-foot wind turbine nearly ended his marriage. So I walk into work on February 7, and my public affairs person says, we normally don't answer stories like this, but I think we should answer this one. I smiled and said, yes. So noon that day, we issued the following thing. I'll just read you part of it. I just want everyone to know that my decision not to serve a second term as Energy Secretary has absolutely nothing to do with the allegations made in this week's edition of The Onion. While I'm not going to confirm or deny the charges specifically, I will say that clean, renewable solar power is a growing source of U.S. jobs and is becoming more and more affordable. So it's no surprise that lots of Americans are falling in love with solar. All right, so let me conclude. So one of my favorite pictures, it's called Earthrise, is taken by Apollo 8, the first orbit around the moon. The last orbit, they turn the capsule towards Earth, and the astronaut takes this picture. And he said, we came all this way to explore the moon. And the most important thing is we discovered the Earth. So that was Christmas Eve, 1968. Now, since then, we've discovered that the climate of the Earth is indeed changing. Very, very compelling evidence that said it's largely caused by greenhouse gases of humans. Look at this. Oops. Look at this. That is not a good place to live. From this vantage point, that looks pretty good. Notice something else. There's nowhere else to go. So we should think about that. So I think we do have a moral responsibility. The most innocent victims of climate change, the poorest people, had nothing to do with it, and the people yet to be born had nothing to do with it. So far, we're saying the following. Cigarette smoking? I like cigarette smoking. Great-grandchildren? I'll never know them. What's the problem? Not only great-grandchildren, but their great-grandchildren. There is a problem. And if you're willing to pay 0.5% of the GDP, it can be solved quickly. It's not a big deal. And if you do it right, it's actually going to be the low-cost solution. So there's an ancient Native American saying, we do not inherit the land from our ancestors. We borrow from our children. Thank you.